So with that, I want to start with kind of a 30,000 foot view of what we're seeing in the market. Again, we have the privilege of talking to marketers from all types of companies every single day. So this is really an amalgamate of the conversations that we have had with marketers across the industry that we want to share back with you. So we're going to start with a pretty, I would say, common cliche. AI is changing how we do marketing. I don't think that's a particularly controversial statement, but it can go a couple of different ways in terms of how I feel like the world of marketing has been blown up in the last 5 years. Everything that I learned at the beginning of my career, I have had to relearn, reinvent, really day over day as AI and new technologies have come onto the scene. So if you go back a couple of years ago, there was this, the LLMs and the chat-based tools come onto the scene. This is maybe about 2022, I think, when ChatGPT launched publicly. The conversation was about content creation. Oh my gosh, look, I can now write a blog post in 5 minutes that used to take me 5 hours. I can now write 10 social posts or, write email copy previously where I would have had to do that myself or hire an agency to do it or get one of my colleagues to do it or what have you. So you were able to really create a lot more quickly and go to market more quickly. And that was really the conversation and the unique advantage that AI brought to the table, 2, 3, 4 years ago. You see organizations creating more and more content. They are creating that content more quickly, which, provided a lot of really good kind of unique advantages to businesses who were early adopters of AI. You could get your content out there faster. You could create more of it. You could get into more places and spaces, more funnel stages, like all of that good stuff. One of the other things that we've seen in the last couple of years is that, especially with like the introduction of vibe coding and folks being able to build more quickly with the help of AI tools, is that there's also been kind of a spread or proliferation of MarTech tools, which it means we have more access to more technology and tools than we ever have had before. So I think it's this chief MarTech stat that I have here on the slide that says we've seen a 100x increase versus 2015 in terms of the number of MarTech tools we have access to. And now marketing organizations are spending about a quarter of their budgets on technology, which is kind of a crazy number. And if you look at like how crowded the MarTech space is, like there's 15 million different providers you can use for email, or quite honestly, there's a bunch of different providers you can use for scaled content creation with regard to AI. So that introduces a little bit of a challenge when we figure out, all right, what are the kind of tools that we can actually use in addition to sort of those horizontal LLMs to help us do our work in this new age. And one of the results, I'm not sure if anyone else has felt this, but in the last couple of years, I felt like my head is just totally spinning when it comes to the amount of information that I'm being bombarded with. And my hypothesis and our hypothesis here at Jasper is that AI actually has a lot to do with that, because you're going to market more quickly, because you are producing more content. Like, that's a more is more mentality, which means that you are getting more notifications on your phone, you're getting more emails, you're getting, there are more web pages being created that are then getting crawled by things like, your traditional search engines and your LLMs, which we'll talk about in just a second. And, what that leads to, in my personal opinion, is kind of just a massive sense of overwhelm. It's this more is more mentality, which maybe was good for the first year or two when we were playing around with AI. But now as we think about how to operationalize AI, how to leverage AI to make your marketing more effective, and we'll talk about that again in a minute too, once we talk about some of the new rules of the road with AI discovery, more is more can actually be a little bit of a kind of a challenge for us as marketers, because as you create more, fragmented AI signals are actually going to erode that brand impact. So what do I mean by this? Think about, you're an organization of 500 people, and 100 of those people are marketers, and you give every marketer access to the LLMs, which most organizations have now done, and you say, great, go ahead and create relative to the things that you need to do. All of a sudden, you're going to have, we've kind of democratized content creation, right? So you are going to have multiple folks across your organization producing content. Everyone's become a content creator. And a lot of times that content is going to make it out into the world in a way that is not necessarily governed or consistent. And again, we'll talk about why this can be a challenge. But the headline is that the LLMs are essentially, in my opinion, search engines on steroids. They have an incredible ability to synthesize and condense information. But the double-edged sword of that is that if all of these things that your organization is now publishing more quickly at scale with AI are not consistent, which a lot of them aren't. I'm sure every marketer's had this challenge before where, if you're in a B2B context, your sales team is saying something totally different than what your marketing messaging is. If you're in a B2C context, maybe there's another part of the brand portfolio that is not necessarily keeping the let's call it the primary brand or the parent brand promise. That can actually start to really hurt you in the world of LLM-driven discovery and search. So one of the concepts that we like to introduce is this idea of thinking about LLMs as really a new ICP or a new person or discovery surface that you're marketing to. So in a traditional context, your ads, your emails, campaigns, websites, experiences would actually go directly to your audiences. Now, a lot of folks are turning to AI to essentially synthesize all of this information that's on the left of the slide, which means that you're really marketing to the AI. You're not necessarily marketing directly to your audience as much as you used to be. So our belief is that in order to influence humans in the way that they're now starting to discover information with this new kind of, I would say, buying behavior, you need to actually influence AI first. So, I love Legally Blonde, so I always like to add memes into my into my presentation. So this is one from Legally Blonde, if I have any fans in the audience. But imagine this is your ICP. They're going to the Claudes, the Geminis, and the Chat GPTs of the world to, ask who it is they should purchase or what it is they should do as a next step. And sort of this new world of AI-driven discovery, as opposed to just traditional search or even kind of a discovery via something like a paid media or organic media or whatever, it brings both opportunities and challenges. So the good news is that LLM visitors convert at a much higher rate than your typical SEO traffic. So if you figure out how to win this game, amazing. You're going to get higher quality traffic, which I think is a huge positive. The challenge, though, is that, again, it's this fragmented information that your company or your brand may be putting out because of the rise of AI and because of the rise of everyone as a content creator, that you now run the risk of AI not, in the best case scenario, not recommending your brand. In the worst case scenario, misrepresenting your brand or giving your end consumer or your end user or your buyer misinformation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kurt, because one of the things that I sat down with him a few months ago to ask was, hey, I was a content marketing leader for many, many years. I know I ran a blog, I ran paid media. I know the rules of the road when it comes to traditional SEO and the things that we need to do to win in that era. So one of the questions that I asked Kurt was, hey, can you help me understand what some of those existing rules are from the old world of SEO that we should keep? What are ones that we need to forget? And then what are some of the new rules that we need to learn or understand when it comes to LLM-driven discovery? So that was kind of the framing for what he'll share with you in the next couple of slides. But with that, I'm happy to share it over to Kurt to drop some knowledge. And maybe, Kurt, I will give you the screen share.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. So before we really dive into it, just wanted to kind of set the record straight. Traditional search is dead. Google had recently shared that AI overviews now reach 2.5 billion users. AI mode had crossed 1 billion users, and Gemini itself is approaching a massive scale. And that was all before what happened on May 19th. On that date, a few months ago, Google held their annual I/O event, and what was widely speculated was finally confirmed. AI is fully integrated into every aspect of what we used to know as traditional search. It was very bittersweet for me personally. Like I mentioned earlier, I'd really had built my career in SEO and up until now defended its role and purpose until the very end. But after that announcement, I've officially closed that chapter. What replaces it, though, is much bigger. It's really not the end of search. It's the expansion of search into a much more dynamic discovery environment where buyers are getting synthesized answers, comparisons, and recommendations before they ever click on a blue link. That's exactly why it's such a pivotal moment for all of us. What we're calling AEO and GEO is really just the next big evolution of the SEO discipline. AEO is about making sure your content's structured clearly enough to become the answer, whether it's in AI overviews, citations, snippets, and zero-click experiences. GEO is about making sure generative engines like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude understand your brand well enough to represent you accurately, consistently, and competitively. And that's the opportunity. We're no longer optimizing just to be found. We're optimizing to shape the answer, shape the comparison, and shape the model's understanding of our brand before the buyer ever reaches our sites. So yes, traditional SEO as a standalone discipline is fading, but what's replacing it is much more strategic, more defensible, and honestly, to me, more interesting. It's a world where visibility is earned through clarity, authority, freshness, and representation quality across every AI-driven discovery surface. That should make all of us here excited, because the companies that learn how to do this early and effectively are not just going to keep up. They're going to help define how their category is understood in the first place. So let's start where every conversation about AI search has to start. What's actually happening to buyer behavior? 94% of B2B buyers now use generative AI somewhere in their purchasing decision. That's from Forrester's recent research Beyond the Click, which was published this year. It's not a trend, not a future state stat. That's how people are researching, evaluating, and narrowing options right now. And the real point isn't just the number, it's what the number means. It means that the buying journey is starting earlier and in places you don't control. Your buyers forming opinions about your category, your competitors, and your brand before they ever hit your site. In a lot of cases, before you even know they're in the market. And this is what that shift looks like on the other side of the click. Organic traffic is down sharply for a ton of sites. So you're absolutely not alone if you've been feeling this yourself. And it's not because SEO suddenly stopped working. It's because the mechanics changed. Queries are longer and now more specific. Most of them no longer need to produce a click anymore. Buyers can get their answers in the AI response and move on. You've probably seen some version of this already in your own analytics. Traffic is flat or down, conversions may be holding steady or even going up, and a growing chunk of demand that's harder to explain. That's this shift showing up in your numbers. So the question isn't whether to care about AI search. The question is whether your content is the one being referenced in the answer. And that's where most teams are stuck, because the ways that you used to be able to track whether you were winning or not don't work anymore. I wanted to kind of make this concrete with a current example. So just this week, Reddit is reportedly reconsidering Google's AI access as the deal that the two companies have had comes up for renewal. And it's not just Reddit. Reuters, USA Today, Politico, and The Economist have all been cited as publishers evaluating tighter restrictions on Google or even blocking them entirely. The bigger signal here is that the old content for traffic bargain is being renegotiated in real time. If more trusted sources narrow access, the value of differentiated brand-owned content goes up even more. That's why visibility has to be measured at the answer layer, not just in organic or referral traffic. We saw a version of this slide earlier with Steve, but just to really kind of drive this point home further, here's what I think most people miss about AI search. It's the execution gap. The conversation right now is all about monitoring. Are we showing up? What's our share of voice? What's our score? At this point, that part of the process is becoming table stakes. Every tool has some version of that story. But the real opportunity is much bigger. LLM-referred visitors convert at a much higher rate than typical organic traffic. It's a smaller audience, technically, yes, at least what we can currently track, but way higher intent. The problem is what happens between seeing the signal and then actually doing something useful with it. You might be able to see the visibility drop, but not always know why. You can get more data, but not necessarily more clarity. And even when the fix is obvious, getting it executed in your brand voice and at your content scale can take weeks, if not months. When teams tell us that they're struggling with AEO and GEO, they usually describe it as a tools problem. We need better tool for monitoring. We need a better tool for content. But again, like the actual problem isn't the tools. It's how the work technically flows between them. So let's look at the left side of this slide. This is what most teams are doing right now. Manual audits in tools like SEMrush or Ahrefs, ad hoc SERP analysis if anyone has time, but it's often skipped. Competitor research, often skipped as well. An AEO, GEO check, then a manual content brief, which can lead to delays. Then a generic AI tool drafts something, which then falls to 3 to 6 revision cycles. We finally publish and then forget about it for a year and a half. That's 6 different handoffs. Each one is a place where work can get dropped, where context gets lost, where the brand voice drifts, and where the cycle just stops mattering by the time it finishes. Now on the right, what does it look like when AEO and GEO is actually embedded in the work? Starting with an automated audit, SERP analysis, competitor research, AEO scoring with impact rank priorities, auto brief into an assisted draft that's fully brand governed, bulk refresh and derivative content to build topical authority, then having the always on monitoring that feeds back into the next cycle. And that leads to the bigger point. The teams pulling ahead are not just using horizontal AI tools, they're building AI systems. Companies pulling ahead right now are actually approaching this differently. They're not treating AI as a set of isolated tools. They're treating AI as a governed operating system for marketing. To distill that down a bit, it really comes down to 4 things, I think. First is speed. Relevance has a shelf life now. If you're slow to publish or update, someone else becomes the source ahead of you. Secondly is scale. Brands need coverage across multiple audiences, use cases, formats, languages, and markets when applicable. Third is consistency. If the brand voice, positioning, and facts are fragmented, AI is going to reflect that fragmentation right back to your customers. And fourth is continuous optimization. Optimizing for AI is not a one-time content project. We'll definitely touch on this a little bit, but for now, teams really have to keep improving, refreshing, and adapting as the models change. That changes the economics of marketing. Instead of adding more people to execute more work, you create systems that compound execution quality and speed together. When that's in place, you don't just get faster output. You get more consistent output, better quality output, more opportunities to test, personalize, refresh, and stay visible. And that's why these 4 things matter so much now: speed, scale, consistency, and continuous optimization. Because once that system's in place, the rules of discoverability start to change too. Now, let's dive into what those rules of discoverability actually are, starting with some old SEO instincts that don't really carry over cleanly anymore. First, ranking, volume, keyword volume, and page count are not the main levers they used to be. Authority, entity, clarity, and depth matter more. Second, generic upper funnel content's losing value fast. If the content feels replaceable or easily repeatable, AI will treat it the same way. And third, technical SEO. It's still necessary, but it's no longer the thing that can win on its own. Clean structure matters, but structure without substance doesn't earn AI visibility and answers. And that said, this isn't a throw out SEO story. It's more of a let's keep the foundation and change the playbook story. Some fundamentals do still matter, and quite a lot actually. Site architecture and crawlability still matter because machines need to understand what they're looking at. Can AI bots actually read the content on the page, or is it too dynamic with tons of JavaScript and tough to discern the actual words within the main content blocks? Topical authority and trusted backlinks still matter because credibility still compounds. And intent plus freshness still matter because even strong content gets skipped when it stops being the best answer right now. So the foundation stays, what changes is the layer on top of it. And what's new is now you also have to optimize for answerability. You need content that AI can actually use: direct definitions, sharp comparisons, decision-ready language, crisp explanations. You need entity clarity so the model understands exactly who you are, what you do, and where you fit. And you need cross-surface measurement because this is no longer just a Google ranking conversation. It's Google, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and whatever else your buyers are using tomorrow. So once you understand these rules, you can start seeing why generic content becomes a liability. Danny Sullivan, who's Google's search liaison, had recently started using this term commodity content to describe the kind of generic, interchangeable content Google's getting better at demoting. A lot of recent algorithm updates over the last few months have targeted this specifically, and sites that have built their success on organic traffic have seen over 80% of it wiped out overnight. Commodity content is the stuff that feels replaceable. Templated listicles, rewritten summaries, keyword stuffed pages, programmatic content, and claims without any real proof behind them. What AI does cite is the opposite. Original research, real frameworks, opinionated thinking, credible customer proof, strong comparison content, and actual expertise. The impact is real. Thin, templated, or programmatic content has seen steep visibility declines each month, while sites built on proprietary data and genuine expert perspective have gained in a big way. So the takeaway here is simple. Don't just publish more. Make sure every piece has at least one thing AI can't get anywhere else, whether it's a unique insight, a real point of view, or evidence worth citing. It's not enough to be differentiated once. You have to stay differentiated in market. And again, that's where speed comes in, because AI systems reward content that's not just strong, but also current. AI platforms like ChatGPT in many cases conduct fan-out queries where when a user prompts it, and then the LLMs run their own web searches in the background and automatically append something like 2026 onto the search queries they're running. They want the latest and greatest content and information. A lot of teams still think about it like traditional SEO. If a page ranked well 6 months ago, it should still be fine. But that's not how AI visibility works. Different platforms pull from the web in different ways and on different timelines, which means freshness is now directly tied into whether you get to keep the citation. And the hard truth is this: stale pages lose AI visibility faster than they lose traditional rankings. Miss the freshness window and you don't just slip a spot, you disappear from the answer. Which means speed and freshness aren't nice to haves. They're table stakes for staying visible at all, and in fact, should be a core KPI of any content marketing team. So we know content freshness helps you stay visible. It's content clarity that determines whether AI actually understands who you are. If your positioning is vague, the output will be vague. AI can only reflect the signals that you give it. Here's a great way to think about how we should be properly capturing AI discovery and optimization. It's almost like we're building content for two different ICPs, like Steve was mentioning earlier. One, the existing ICPs you all know as your core audiences. But the second ICP is now the LLMs, who require a little more structure, direction, and specificity with the messaging. How do we successfully target two ICPs with the same content? AI can only repeat the signals you give it. So let's make sure that we're really able to control our own narratives. A lot of brands are too abstract, intentionally or not, in how they describe themselves. If you use fuzzy language, the model gives you fuzzy representation back. So here are some fixes that can actually be pretty practical. One, we just want to name our category clearly. Say exactly who the product is, who it's for, and what the job does. We want to make your differentiator explicit, and then reinforce that language across your structure, not just in one headline. This is one of the fastest wins because it's usually not a giant rebuild. It's mostly a messaging discipline issue, and it sets up the bigger framework for how to think about this all together. I mentioned this a few slides earlier, but I really want to drive this mindset shift home. A win in AI search is temporary by default. If the source goes stale or a competitor publishes something fresher and higher quality, the visibility can disappear quietly. GEO and AEO are not campaigns. They're ongoing operating motions. Each LLM tends to prefer and prioritize different types of content as well. ChatGPT, for example, still shows a lot of traditional blog content, comparisons, and listicles. That's not going to work on Claude. Claude, on the other hand, favors really in-depth content where expertise is not just shown and proven. Facts, data points, product specs, firsthand testimonials, they want to see if you're an actual authority. You could, and in some cases will, be tracking the same prompts across different LLMs and have two completely different pages being pulled in as a source or citation. This is the part I think a lot of teams underestimate the most. The hard part is not spotting one issue, one page, or to improve or create. The hard part is keeping a living list of your priority content and knowing which assets are aging out of relevance. Operationally, that means every important page should have an owner, a last updated date, and a clear refresh threshold. When I mentioned earlier that content freshness should be a core KPI for teams, this is what I was referring to, a simple signal that you can all use internally. If a priority page is past 12 weeks since its last substantial update, that should trigger a review. That doesn't just mean updating the date, changing some punctuation, or something else trivial. A general rule of thumb is a good refresh constitutes 20% of the content changing or being expanded upon. That could be in terms of product details, service updates, new competitors to compare against, or updated figures or reporting metrics. Anything that shows that you're staying as up to date as possible. And this doesn't mean every old page is bad. It means that teams shouldn't have to guess what assets need attention next. So to take it a bit higher level again, when you're thinking about your optimization strategy, there's really 3 layers and they all matter. SEO, the foundation. Your content still needs to be indexed, crawlable, and findable. AEO is the next layer. It requires your content is structured clearly enough to show up in answers and citations, snippets, and AI overviews. And GEO is where your brand becomes a source AI systems recognize, understand, and trust enough to recommend. These layers are still somewhat independent of each other, but they still all work together. You can't skip the foundation, and you can't ignore the new layers either, which is why the simplest version of this whole story is this. SEO gets you found, AEO gets you cited, GEO gets you trusted and recommended. That's really the hierarchy. So when we're creating content now, the question is not just, can this rank? It's also, is it clear enough, current enough, and credible enough to shape how AI understands our brand? And with that, Steve, let me pass it back to you. Oh, I think you're on mute.
There we go. I'm like, I knew I was going to have some kind of technological snafu before we wrap this up. When we've given this talk track, like I always tend to screenshot, and I'm not sure if we're certainly happy to distribute the slides afterward. I'm not sure if that's something the Product Marketing Alliance endorses or allows, but we're happy to do it just for context. I always like to take screenshots of the slides too, and I reference them as I'm doing my own work to think about some of the new rules that I need to remember as I'm going through my day-to-day. So I'll go ahead and steal the screen share again, and we'll move to Q&A in just a minute. But I'll go ahead and start the slideshow back up, kind of bringing us home in terms of how we at Jasper can help you with some of this stuff. There's a ton of GEO or AEO GEO tools in the market. I'm sure folks, and we have relationships with a lot of these folks as well, because we're all kind of, we're singing from the same hymn sheet, if you will. Your players, like I think Profound's a good example. They will help you monitor how your brand is doing in the world of AEO and GEO. How are you ranking? What signals are good? What are maybe some of those things that you should consider doing better, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the unique advantages of leveraging a tool like Jasper is that we can actually help you act on those insights with your brand assets at its core. So as opposed to just saying, hey, you've got this problem with AEO and GEO, or you have this opportunity area, however you want to frame it, we can actually then help you make the optimizations to actively influence how your brand becomes more and more discoverable. So with that, I'll show a little, we have this cool thing that we just built called our GEO Hub. And it does exactly what I just talked about. This video is about, I think, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes long. And then we will move straight into Q&A. And I've got some thought starter questions for you, Kurt. I know there was kind of there's a debate in the industry about, is SEO dead? Is SEO not dead? I think there's a bunch of folks on this webinar who, are in the SEO is not dead camp. So I'd love your perspective on how SEO exists in harmony with AEO GEO. So I'll circle back to that in just a second. We can also help you measure. Totally forgot about that part. But I'll go ahead and run this video, and then you all can take a look at the latest thing that we've just built. Maybe it'll be valuable for your day-to-day work.
Let me introduce you to Jasper's GEO Hub and GEO Agent. This solution gives you the insights you need to quickly take action so your brand starts showing up more consistently in AI search. The first thing you'll see is our GEO Hub dashboard. Here you can analyze a specific set of queries and pages that matter to your business, and then see exactly how your brand is performing across different AI providers. The report starts with a simple scorecard. Is your brand showing up? Is it being cited? What's the sentiment around your brand? From there, you can dive deeper into your share of voice by model, compare yourself against competitors, and understand what's really working well. As you move through the report, you can also drill into individual queries to see exactly how AI providers are answering them. That gives you a clear picture of where the biggest opportunities are to improve your visibility. But we don't just want to show you insights. We want to help you act on them. That's why the report also recommends content opportunities based on what it's finding. With a single click on Create All in Grid, Jasper builds a grid that's already populated with your data. You choose your IQ layer, then Jasper runs a 6-step workflow to generate drafted articles, FAQs, key takeaways, and schema markup, all wrapped up with a quality score. The last piece is the GEO agent. One of the biggest questions we hear from customers is, what do I actually need to do to increase my citation rate or improve my brand presence? That's exactly what the GEO agent is built for. You can ask goal-based questions like, my brand presence is at 20%. What can I do this week to increase it 5%? The agent uses built-in GEO strategies and expertise to give you recommendations in natural language. It doesn't stop there. If you like the recommendations, the agent can start creating the content that you see here on the right and can send it directly into your project management workflow, like Monday.com. That's Jasper's GEO solution, from insight to strategy to execution, so your brand starts showing up where AI is shaping customer decisions.
Amazing. So we shared a little bit more about how it is we can help you at Jasper, but I think the cool thing about myself and Kurt is that neither of us are salespeople, candidly. We are marketers that have been doing this for many, many years. So hopefully you can see that in our conversations in the chat that we are doing our very best to be as transparent as possible about some of the things that we're seeing going on in the industry. So of course, we work with Jasper. We work for Jasper. We have what I believe is a really strong tool to help marketers navigate all of this. But we're also very happy to just have that industry level conversation with you all about kind of the trends that we're seeing. So with that, I'm going to open up for Q&A. I'll stop sharing. And I think there are some good questions in the chat. So with that, maybe, let's see. I'm taking a look. Kurt, is there anything that's sticking out to you that you want to address right away? I have the big umbrella question is we seem to have hit a nerve with, SEO is dead, and folks are saying SEO is not dead. It's foundational. So I'd love to maybe we start with like getting your perspective on kind of how SEO works now in harmony or disharmony for that matter with, the new things of AEO and GEO.
Yeah, let's jump into that one. I know that one was a little bit of a controversial point. And I'm not going to call it a cop-out. Maybe it's a caveat. I didn't say SEO is dead. I said traditional search is dead. And the justification and reason for that now is you can't go to Google and do a search and not have AI be a part of any part of that search experience anymore. AI is just now like inherently baked into pretty much everything about what used to be traditional search. And trust me, like I'm a very strong proponent of SEO. Traditional SEO, really solid, like technical SEO, really great leading content strategies. And like we mentioned in the presentation, like it's always going to be the foundation. Like we want to make sure that our websites just work, they're clean, they're organized, they're structured, like related content and topics are linked to each other. Like that's all just like kind of core traditional SEO principles, and still a really big part of optimizing for the LLMs and AI search visibility as well. So traditional search, that's, I think, in the past, but SEO is still very much alive.
Amazing. Kurt, other questions on here? I'm seeing some, let's see. I think we can knock out some of the ones that are easy answers. I saw one in here from, let's see, From Sandra, I know SEO and AEO. What is GEO again? Generative engine optimization. From what I understand, and Kurt, you correct me if I'm wrong, SEO is, our traditional what's showing up in search engines, the conversation around keyword rankings, and ranking on the page, all of that good stuff. AEO is that answer that you're going to get at the very top of when you go to Google Search Now, for example, and it'll give you that AI summary. And then generative engine optimization is where you're going to actually be getting those recommendations as you're typing into ChatGPT. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. I think this is kind of simplifying it a little bit, but AEO, I think the goal that we want to think about as marketers is like, how do we get our content to earn the citations? So we're being pulled in as a source, as a trusted authority. GEO, like you're saying, Steve, is like really all about the brand recommendations. And another like simple example is like, if we're just going to ChatGPT and we're typing in, what are the best, restaurants near me? You're not going to get a whole list of like detailed descriptions and links to different websites and things like that. You're probably going to get 3 to 5 recommendations of the top restaurants based off of like reviews and ratings. So in that case, if we're a local restaurant, we want to be in that top 3 to 5 restaurants that are listed like very high up in that response. It's all about like, how do we get our brand to be trusted in our own industry?
Awesome.
I saw another question in the chat here. What can help ensure blog articles are on our own site are cited and trusted? So this kind of goes back to that framework that we were reviewing, and it's this whole notion of what we're calling non-commodity content. We want to make sure that, the content strategy for our blog, it really kind of provides expertise, authority. Google's had this, expert EAT framework, experience, expertise, authority, and trust. We want to make sure that our content strategy and what we're putting on our blog can reflect that in some way. So really kind of like making sure that we can prove that we know what we're talking about. If you have like author bios that can really kind of establish like the credentials for why that author is actually qualified to be speaking on that topic, about, years in the industry, certifications, anything like that. Anything like that we can do that kind of just shows that we're that true expert and authority, it's really going to help the blog strategy and getting picked up as more citations within the LLMs.
I saw one here that's a B2B specific question. So this one I'm happy to take, and this is from Anna. So the question is, I work in B2B and we gate our research to capture leads and not give away our insights away for free, not give away the insights for free. The LLMs cannot read PDFs. Any recommendations? This is I think this is an age-old one in B2B. And I personally am not as someone who's worked in content marketing for many, many years, I'm not a big fan of the PDFs, specifically because those PDFs are harder to crawl. That said, if you still need to do the lead capture, my recommendation would be, which is, obviously that's table stakes for a B2B organization, especially if you're focused on demand gen, is I would just be really intentional about what you're gating versus what you are not gating. So maybe you think about building a little bit of an experience before the gate that gives away some of those top nuggets of information, a web experience that can help synthesize the report, or at least share more about what the report or what the insights are about, so that you become known in that kind of category that you're trying to define or to own. So I would say, the more information you can give up front, the better. I think there's still a time and a place for gating, but I see a lot of organizations that just say here's our new report, form fill. That's not going to do you any good. So here's our new report that covers these 5 topics, and here's one key insight per topic. We actually have a ton more analysis that sits behind the gate. Come find out more. So that's going to be much more effective in terms of getting you discovered. And I think that logic applies to really any type of marketing that you're doing. If you're using some kind of PDF or what have you, think about structuring your web experiences for the ways that LLMs will discover. Something that I thought, and I'm curious, Kurt, if you agree or disagree with this. We know that AI loves FAQs now. We know that they love, quick answers, in the same way that humans are kind of lazy when they're discovering information. AI tools are just as lazy, if not more lazy than we are. So, if you're thinking about a thought leadership piece or something like executive focused content or whatever, you don't necessarily want to put an FAQ section at the top of that. That's not going to read super polished. So my kind of challenge to the industry is thinking about like maybe it's really more of a content design question, which is like, can you build a web experience that has, on the left rail your thought piece, and on the right rail, or in kind of a text box halfway down the page, your FAQs or a summary or something of that nature. So, maybe you need to think about your landing page design or your web design to ensure that you can fit multiple things into one box. That's my like layperson's view in that. But Kurt, I don't know if you agree or disagree when it comes to content.
I really think you hit the nail on the head with that. And like this is actually something that a lot of our customers, have been actively trying to work through as well, because they have a similar setup where there's just a lot of great information that's gated, and like it's just been a huge lead gen driver for them. So it's really like a careful balance. Like, how do we pull out some of those key insights from the PDF without necessarily giving the farm away for free? And it's like, Steve, like what you're saying, some of those ideas, like pulling out a couple of those data points, turn them into like 3 bulleted key takeaways that you can kind of put on the top of that landing page. Have like a pretty good summary, a couple paragraphs, maybe talk about like, the authors that actually like helped produce that report, and like why that report actually should be something that's, really important within the industry. And then like the FAQ is always a good idea too. And, have like simple FAQs of like, who is this report for? How frequently does this report get published? Like simple things like that. Like if an LLM is crawling that page, they know that there's like this great information that they probably can't see, but they can pull, a bunch of the insights about the report itself, to where if somebody is going to a Claude and they're looking for that specific report in their industry, there's a good chance that you then get recommended, and that actual landing page might be pulled in as a citation, because you've been able to provide enough kind of like high level details that shows how important it actually is.
I see a cluster of questions that are focused around, number one, I think Donna had this question: how do we get our clients or our board or our senior leadership or whomever that stakeholder audience is to care about this? And then there's kind of a follow-up question of like, how do you quantify the ROI of something like this? And my high level thoughts there are, number one, there's a lot of tools out there, Jasper being one of them. But again, there's other tools that exist in the universe that can help you do this. And one of the things that we try to do is we try to give you a score. So in, marketing attribution is like notoriously difficult. And so many organizations I work with either have first touch attribution, last touch attribution. It's very hard to find a multi-touch attribution model. Very hard to get clarity on like what marketing dollar is actually influencing your revenue or your pipeline or whatever it is you care about. So we try to create proprietary metrics, and a lot of other tools are doing this as well, to say, hey, here's your score of how you're doing in this world. We did this at LinkedIn many years ago with something that we used to call the SSI, the Social Selling Index, if anyone's familiar with that here on the call. But it was basically, we sold Sales Navigator, and we would give people a score that said, hey, here's how well you're showing up on LinkedIn and how likely you are to more or less be considered as a trusted seller or visible seller or whatever you have it. So these GEO scores are a very similar concept. They are meant to give you an indicator of how well you're doing in this world. So my recommendation would be, take a look at some of these tools, and you can start to see how I think a client would start to care if they see that their competitor is significantly outranking them, or their score is significantly higher than another score. That tends to like light a fire under people. And then in terms of the quantifying that value, I mean, in a perfect world, if you have the right attribution in place to understand where your traffic sources are coming from, or like your referral traffic, then connecting that down into how that referral traffic is converting, and at what rate, by what source, like that's the perfect way to do it. In the absence of that, you can use something like a dashboard that we have to say, hey, 6 months ago we were here, now we're here. And then you can start to introduce some of the underlying methodology that we use to justify why that perspective is not just like a random number. So there's ways to, I would say, there's like measurement heavy, which I haven't seen many organizations be super successful with, candidly, because it's the Wild West. And then you have measurement light, which is using a score like what we have in the GEO Hub, or other tools have to get you part of the way there, and at least give you a reasonable hypothesis to stand on.
Yeah, and then I think like even then justifying, with some of the things that we were talking about earlier, where multiple studies have been done where traffic coming from AI sources converts anywhere between 4 to 20 times as well as traditional organic traffic. So we know that if we're able to capture more traffic coming from the LLMs, it's such higher quality, it's going to convert at a much higher rate. So even if we're just triangulating like referral traffic and direct traffic and some organic traffic, or even just using like a simple LLM score and seeing that increase over time, that's enough to know that like, okay, like we're doing the right thing, we're building the momentum in the right way, and it's going to kind of pay off in our pipeline, further down the funnel.
Let's see. Other questions, Kurt, that are striking your fancy? Thank you for the engagement, folks, by the way. This is great. If there's anything that we don't have a chance to answer today, feel free to ping us on LinkedIn. Like, we're happy to continue that conversation, because I know there's a lot of goodness here.
Oh, there's a question here. Let me see if I can throw that up. How do you know if AI is citing your brand right now? Is there a way to check? So yes, Jasper, with our GEO Hub that we were watching a video on, you can absolutely set your brand up there. There's a lot of other tools out there on the market. It seems like everyone has some version of, an AI visibility tool these days. And really like what can be done here is, you put in your website, you can put in some competitors to really help them, understand the industry, what content is performing well in AI search versus not. And then, you want to track, several different prompts, dozens, if not hundreds of prompts that are really high priority for your business. And what tools like Jasper and Profound and some of the other ones do is, they'll regularly run those prompts across all the different LLMs that we're tracking. And then they'll constantly kind of pull in what the responses are on a regular basis. And they'll see, well, how is that response structured? Who's getting mentioned as a brand? Who's getting cited as like a content source? It's a great way. It's not perfect because we're not going to be able to track every single prompt that every single potential customer of yours is ever going to search. But we want to get as good of a sample size as we possibly can. It's similar to how, we used to track keyword rankings on the SEO side. We're not going to be able to figure out every single keyword that people are going to use. But if we're showing up and we're represented well for the prompts that we really care about, then we know, okay, like we're in a good spot, and let's make sure that we're able to keep it going, because, like we mentioned earlier, AEO and GEO is never just something that you can be done with. Like, it's always changing. We always have to kind of stay on our toes. We always have to be refreshing and creating new content. But there are ways just to kind of make sure that things are moving in the right direction over time.
Maybe this is a good one to end us off on. Can you recommend in 3 strategic sentences to not lose my brand relevance in the noisy tech world? Or kind of key advice in 3 sentences to sum up how to go forward from Neha.
Wow. 3 sentences. First, I would say, make sure there is ideal brand consistency across your website. Make sure your content strategy reflects your industry expertise and authority. And then maybe that 3rd sentence is, don't take your foot off the gas, like figure out what works, by just doing those first 2 sentences, brand consistency and expertise and authority, and find ways to keep casting a wider net. That's a great way to kind of make sure you're really expanding and maintaining really good AI visibility.